Hi, folks. Welcome to Wednesday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. I think I might start saying videocast first because we're getting more hits on that. A few things happened today. There's PMQs. We're now officially not getting an extension to Brexit. And Nicola Sturgeon went full total mad on the presser today.
Oh, come on, not mad. She said more or less said, I've had enough.
Well, fair enough, but we're going to leave that till last because that's the most fun. PMQs, guys, I did catch PMQs. The speaker is failing miserably in pressuring Boris Johnson to actually answer a question. That's my overall view of PMQs. But Jimmy, we'll let you have first bite of the cherry this morning.
I think you're quite right, mate. Lindsay Hoyle's proven rather a disappointment after John Bercow. Probably got the job because he was instructed by the Tory party exactly how they want him to behave, or they wouldn't have gave him the job given that he was Deputy Speaker previously. But Boris just gets away with bluff and bluster as usual. I thought Keir Starmer had another good outing. Absolutely nailed him on a couple of things. The interesting thing about the whole Leicester lockdown and the Pillar 2 figures not being reported to Leicester until last Thursday, meaning that effectively the public health operation in Leicester and the council couldn't actually work out where any of these cases were. I think the figures that he gave, they thought they were 80 odd cases. And with the Pillar 2 figures added in, there were 980 odd cases that they had to deal with, 980 positive tests, which is a lot. So, Boris was just his usual bluster himself, to the point where he ended up babbling on about Labour and the Labour policy on children in schools again. I mean, the Tories didn't have a policy on children in schools anymore. They're shutting the ones that they bloody reopen.
What I think might be interesting to come out of that is somebody was telling porkies. Either Keir Starmer figures were wrong and his source was lying to him, which was supposedly the mayor of Leicester he'd spoken to, who he inferred gave him the figures, or Boris was telling porkies because he'd spoken to the mayor the day before.
Yeah, well, Norrie, I'll tell you where the scandal lies there, mate. The contract. It is not in Deloitte's. It's not a stipulation in Deloitte's contract that they have to inform either Public Health England or local authorities of where and how many they find positive cases. That's not written into their contract. Now, Stella Creasy found that out in a written parliamentary response that she got this morning. How on earth can you give somebody a contract to do testing and then not write into the contract that they have to share the results with Public Health England? That's ludicrous.
I'll take a stab at that, sir. I'll answer that question, sir, because you don't want the real figures released into the public domain.
Exactly. This is about mining data, having these figures, and then selling that data all around the planet to people that want to use the data, whilst not using the data for its primary purpose, which is to protect public health.
Stuart.
Aye, well, as far as I could see, the figures of the data that the Leicester local authority had was about 80. But I like this term, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. What's it? Well, anyway, Pillar 2 was 944 that they didn't. I mean, the difference is gross.
It's noticeable as well, Stuart, that we've talked about this before, where England likes to obfuscate on figures and keep things rather opaque, whereas Scotland from the start have tried to be absolutely clear on all their figures. And it's noticeable that, because somebody mentioned it later on with Nicola Sturgeon, the Pillar 2 figures were included into Scotland's overall figures on June the 15th, because that was the first time that UK UK-wide testing could provide the data in such a format as we could include that with our normal daily testing data through the NHS.
I remember that. I
well, there's
remember them chasing the figures. They wanted the figures.
Well, Norrie, I sent you, I don't know if you've got it, I sent you a thing that I found where we break down the data all around Scotland, and it shows a huge spike on the 15th of June. And I thought, my God, what's that? And then until it was explained, that's what it was. Pillar 2 figures going into our figures.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that yet again, the Scottish Government has been far more transparent and far more upfront with the data than England chooses to be.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the headline stuff. Keir Starmer challenged the Prime Minister last week. He'd told the mayor of Hove, a seaside town in the south of England with beaches, that they need to show some guts.
Well, this was the Keir Starmer's really questioning whether there was a policy to trace and test, and that just showing some guts wasn't good enough.
Right.
And Bournemouth had to go into emergency lockdown, didn't it? Well,
told the MP for Brighton, which is the other big seaside resort on the south coast of England, to show some guts. And at that point, 500,000 people were on Bournemouth Beach, and everybody knows what. Well, they saw the pictures of that.
Yeah, the
Prime Minister said the seaside, everybody should be welcome at the seaside, and it's people that are being irresponsible. So we discussed this before, and everybody that's up to speed on just what's happening with this disgusting government, what they've done is they've moved the responsibility from the course wherever this virus pandemic goes, from themselves onto the public. And it was blatant today. People are responsible, said the Prime Minister. He said as much today.
That was, I mean, it was pretty obvious. I would say 2 months ago it was obvious that was the direction it was going to go.
We could see that, but I'm not sure Joe Public could see that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if there's a headline tomorrow: Boris Johnson accuses public of being irresponsible. It only matters if the press pick this up, and start pointing out. Well, there's more than a pinch of shite down on Brighton Beach, Jimmy. I believe that your burger bun wrappers are full of it.
Aye, that's a strange and worrying trend. Not that I would pick up a burger box on a beach thinking there might be a burger in it, but I certainly wouldn't pick one up now.
Imagine going into the sea at Bournemouth. Any of those days for 500,000 people were using it as a toilet.
Well,
aye, you've not got sand between your toes, Stuart. That's for sure.
Why weren't the toilets open?
Well, that's because they don't.
Boris said it was safe.
Public health reasons, mate. They'd have to have they'd need as many cleaners in the lavies as they had punters in there.
And just imagine what it's like when have you been to a football match or a rugby match, and when you have to go into the toilets, social distancing doesn't exist at a football match.
Excuse me. I'll have you know, Murrayfield has got very big toilets, and many of them.
So has Easter Road, but it doesn't stop people rushing to the toilet at the same time.
Actually, yeah, I have seen queues at Murrayfield.
Aye, for the bar, yeah, JK Bobag.
No, for the toilets as well.
Can I just say a bad word about Ian Blackford? He's getting worse by the week. I don't know. He made the obligatory tribute to the rescue services over the Glasgow stabbings last week. But after that, he's only got 2 questions. He asked the first question. There was an obvious second question that he should have asked, and he didn't. He carried on just with his stupid question. He's not doing any good at all, sitting there digging up tatties in Sky.
He needs a media guy in there to explain to him that standing up on the floor in the Commons talking the way he talked today might work, but it doesn't work when you're on your own in a room in Sky. He needs to find a different way to phrase his questions.
I would go further than that. He needs to be replaced. He's had his time. We've seen what he can do, and if he can't do better than that, it's time to go.
I'm beginning to think he is not the best option.
Yeah, there's far better options.
Tommy Shepherd
Usually sit on the benches next to him.
I'm not sure Tommy Shepherd's your man. Tommy can be a bit verbose. I was thinking more Philippa Whitford, to be honest. She has
There's a
real
few-
gravitas.
The thing about Tommy Shepherd is he's awfully good on his feet. He's a bit like the Jason Leach character, you know. He's a very good communicator.
Yeah, I think it's a time for experts, and I would like to see Philippa Whitford standing up, ripping Boris apart.
Well, I'm not arguing about
that. Anything else from PMQs that struck you as particularly interesting? Apart from the litany.
Andrew Bowie.
Oh, God.
Andrew Bowie, after Keir Starmer had finished, had a nice wee rant, but basically all he was doing was turning his back on Boris, dropping his trousers and baring his cheeks so that Boris could pull some numbers out of Andrew Bowie's arse.
Enjoy a furrow.
Aye, because we went from 5 billion being announced yesterday to 100 billion, and then somewhere Boris pulled out 600 billion. So I'm assuming that he pulled out Andrew Bowie's keister at some point. That was almost embarrassing to watch a Scottish Tory be quite such a fanboy of such an absurd clown as Boris Johnson, but I suppose we should never be surprised at that.
Well, I don't think there's much doubt about this week's line of attack from the Tories in Scotland. It's going to be all about the tourist industry.
Right.
So the first outbreak can be laid at their door.
Yeah, it's a very shaky case they've got. And we'll come to it in a minute, but it really is. As soon as you go abroad, or even just mention Leicester,
well, they've not
case at all
they've not even got the back end of the touring industry for this nonsense, guys. I mean, I know people, loads of people that work within the tourist industry. They've worked so hard to get their venues ready to open, and they're so excited about what's happening this weekend and what's happening next weekend. But I'll tell you what they're not, is wanting a mass influx of people from south of the border. They're not wanting that. They're not expecting it. They've no planned for it. What they've got is wonderful plans in place to operate socially distanced in a innovative and exciting way. But all that gets tossed out the window if thousands of people turn up in these wee villages rather than the few hundred that they can cope with.
And what about, did you see the police federation guy this morning on TV? I mean, July the 4th, Saturday night, the first night the pubs open. Pubs are open after 3 months. Apparently, it's also a full moon, and apparently the emergency services do take that into account because it's worse. It's worse than a full moon.
I'm sorry, people poo-poo that. I've been in the license trade most of my life at one point or another. And I'm telling you, full moons influence the way people act.
Aye.
Oh, aye, all the banners come out.
It's payday. It's payday this week, so it's a horrific Saturday night out.
Well, effectively, England are preparing for Hogmanay on Saturday. They're preparing for New Year's Eve, which is a horrendous thing for our politicians to foist upon A&E departments up and down the country, given how hard that they've worked, given how hard everybody in the health services work. They should have opened on a Monday and let this thing happen gradually. And for, I don't know, is it Boris being a Donald Trump fanboy at this point in time? To just pick July the 4th, American Independence Day. Why on earth would you open on a Saturday?
Nobody's talking about the effect it's going to have on the police and, as you say, A&E. None of the papers have picked up on the fact that they've got the coronavirus burden to carry, plus this weekend's going to be back to normal.
Aye.
City centres all over England are going to be police vans and fights and stabbings. And
it's going to be a fud fest, mate, an absolute fud fest. Every clown on the planet will be out to play.
Even worse than that, because all the sensible people will stay at home. It will only be the dafties that are out.
Aye. I'll be honest with you, mate. I'm choking to sit in a beer garden and have a pint and a fag and a blather with my mates. But if I was doing there's not a chance I'd be out on Saturday.
Aye. Interesting thing, we're kind of moving it on to Sturgeon's presser, but connecting to what we've just been talking about. There was an interesting idea brought up by Sturgeon that if this wee spike down in, is it Ayrshire?
Dumfries and Galloway.
Dumfries and Galloway. If they were to shut down Dumfries and Galloway, that would involve having to shut the border between England and Scotland partially.
Did she say that?
Well, she brought it up because it's not just the border with the rest of Scotland, it's got a border with England.
I think the way that Jason Leach, who would be more in charge of this than the First Minister, described it, she said that they've already formed I forget what it's called, but it's a cross-border management group.
There's public health teams and action teams in place already, and they're working it.
Situation, and to be honest, the numbers are tiny. The only reason that we're hearing about it at all, there are 5 infected cases, and they didn't have any last week.
The reason we're hearing about it, it's because it looks like that the infection came from south of the border.
Oh, well.
Yeah,
it's not proven yet, but there's a theory that it was actually people travelling up from England that brought the infection.
Yeah, but if it's somebody from Carlisle that's crossed the border and brought it, you can hardly make a big case out of it.
Exactly. I mean, Stuart, we've talked about this before. A lot of people work on the other side of the border and live here, and vice versa. I think Nicola's line on that one was a beauty, saying, come on, it's 5 cases. I think people should be reassured by the fact that those 5 cases have flagged up to us, and we have an action plan in place to deal with it. Just bang on.
Look at the noise, shall we say, that there was at today's presser over two workers at RAF Lossiemouth in the north of Scotland who tested positive for antibodies.
Yeah.
Not actually infectious, only 2 people.
That's interesting because, as far as I know, they still don't have a reliable antibody test.
Well, exactly. It probably turned out that it was an unreliable test.
There's every chance. I think the local community, I know a couple of people that stay up that way, and the local community have had concerns with people coming up to do maybe 3 or 4 weeks work and then heading back south again. But so far, there hasn't been any problem.
They're building a new...
They're extending Lossiemouth, mate. They're making it...
the runway?
Not just the runway, mate. All the facilities in and around the base. Basically, Lossiemouth and Lookers are being revamped completely as they've been repurposed.
So the British government must be getting them ready for American airplanes then.
Well, no, the Lookers is no longer used as an air base. I think we're putting in an extra, whatever, a squadron.
Lookers is an infantry base now, I think.
Yeah, they closed Kinloss and Lookers as active airfields, so that everything's concentrated in Lossiemouth now.
But the other thing that nobody ever does is ask the question: would England be prepared to close the Scottish-English border if there was a sudden spike in Scotland? Would the north of England insist on it?
You'll forgive me, mate, but when the Stone of Destiny disappeared, they shut the border in about 2 hours. They were perfectly happy to shut the border for that.
But that's important.
It's ours anyway. They stole it in the first place.
That's an artifact stolen from Scotland to live in England being returned to Scotland, and you can't have that, mate. No, it's a bit like our oil money. That never gets to come over the border either.
Can we get through this whole cross-border issue? Because it's got legs and arms and goes in various directions. And the First Minister brought it up, and other people brought it up. There's been a huge amount of arguments about it, but let's make this absolutely clear. You don't actually have to have a roadblock on the M74, the M6, to close the border. All you do is what they've done in Australia. Basically, the state of New South Wales has a border with the state of Victoria. The state of Victoria has got a bit of a spike at the moment. The state of New South Wales has said that anybody who's resident in one of these hotspot areas in the state of Victoria, if they turn up in New South Wales, they'll be fined 11,000 new Australian dollars. That's about £3,500. That's not even political. And yet the First Minister spent half of our presser today defending attacks from hyena journalists saying, oh, why would you close the border? What are you trying to prove?
Would anybody like to see a clip of that?
Absolutely.
I would.
I'm sorry, that's only 3 out of 4,000 people. Here we go. This is a bit messy, guys. I didn't really get a chance to edit
investigation, that the situation might change. I can't rule that out. But what I fear, and again, we're working hard to avoid this, is a situation where we become aware of a local outbreak when it is already transmitting in the community. So you might have 100 cases, and whatever we do, it is being reactive and possibly too late to stop that spreading further. So everything about this virus right now is concerning and causes anxiety, and that is understandable. But take some reassurance from the fact that at such an early stage, the detail that we are sharing with you right now, it gives a sense that the local teams, as well as to contain this. Alistair Grant from the Herald.
Here's the fella.
Hi there, thanks very much. Just to go back to the kind of cross-border quarantine row. I appreciate you saying you don't have any plans to do this yet, but you're also very much still keeping it on the table, it sounds like. But how could a 14-day quarantine on travellers from England or elsewhere in the UK possibly be policed or enforced, given I think Ian Livingstone was saying yesterday that the current 14-day quarantine for people from overseas, the police in Scotland have difficulty enforcing that as it stands?
Can I just make a point before I come on to the detail of your question, a preliminary point, and I'm not having a go at you, Alistair, I'm just observing, I suppose, on how you framed the question, because others will be using the same language. The fact that we are describing this as a row should make us all take a long, hard look at ourselves. Look around the country, the world right now. I've already talked about America. You'll have the same situation between different landers in Germany. I just got tweeted by a public health expert, I think, in Australia this morning saying something along the lines of, this is standard between states and Australia. Other countries are just doing what they need to do in a public health sense to try to stop the transmission of a virus. We're talking about Dumfries and Galloway here. I hope it doesn't, but just for argument's sake, if we don't succeed in containing this and it was to run out of control, then we'd be looking at how we stopped it moving from Dumfries and Galloway into other parts of Scotland or south into England. This is public health. And the fact that in Scotland we are trying to turn it into, and I'm saying we to be charitable because it isn't me, but the fact that some are trying to turn this into a kind of standard political constitutional row is frankly disgraceful. And if I ever stand here and say, I'm worried that this might be seen politically or constitutionally, so I'm not going to consider an option that could actually save people's lives. If you ever hear me saying that or suspect that's the way in which I'm dealing with this, then that's the point you will know I've stopped doing my job and carrying out my duty properly. And I am determined I'm not going to get into that position. Now, on to your question. Yes, there would be a lot of practical considerations, as I'm sure there are between American states and Australian states and different parts of Germany or other parts, just as there are real practical difficulties right now in the UK government having reimposed a lockdown in Leicester, but not surrounding areas of Leicester. These things throw up huge practical difficulties. They have to be considered.
There you go then, lads.
I love it, love it, love it. I actually wrote that line down. I thought it was beautiful. I'm saying we to be charitable because it isn't me.
she's a genius at these pressers. I can see her performances at these press briefings. They've been used in colleges and training people how to handle a press.
Aye.
Sure, I missed this.
Somebody extremely loud all of a sudden.
Oh, sorry. I missed this this presser. Somebody came to the door, but I believe she actually went on to list the newspapers whose headlines would twist her words. Stuart, you said something about that.
Oh, absolutely. She said that it doesn't matter what I say. You've already decided what the front pages will be. And she listed the newspapers. It was the Express, the Mail, the Telegraph,
the Herald.
Herald, the Record. I don't think she mentioned the Record. I don't know why, but possibly she should have done.
It's quite a sad indictment that right-wing journalists never listen to the answers that other right-wing journalists get. Every day we get, whoever gets to go first, ask that question that is coming for the right-wing press. And then they'll just ask a variation of it. They never listen to the answer. I mean, fair play. They're handing her a bat And she doesn't just bat their questions away. She rams it back between the cheeks of their farter, but it's getting a bit embarrassing watching it every day. It's entertaining, but...
there were so many good moments. I'm sorry, I might even get a recording of this and sit and watch it later. The guy, Simon, whatever his name, Johnson from the Telegraph, he is one of the worst. So he brought up Professor Hugh Pennington, an 85-year-old virologist who knows nothing about viruses at all. It's not his...
If he's a virologist, he does know what he's talking about.
Well, he's not a virologist, whatever it is.
I can't remember. A bacteriologist, is he?
He's not an expert in this field.
Yeah.
And he's certainly not an expert in security.
Yeah, ancient of that. And on top of that, he's a member of an extreme right-wing unionist group. And yet they keep hauling him out. So his name got mentioned. And I've got in here, she battered. This is the First Minister. She battered Simon. First of all, she said, go and take a look at other countries. This is not political. And I've written there, she was angry. She actually nearly lost it at that point because they do annoy her at times.
I have to say something here about Pennington. I watched them on Question Time a couple of weeks ago. And he talked good sense. That quite scared me because I expected him to be a raving lunatic, but he isn't.
He is a raving lunatic, mate. He's now dumbed
on the
it.
unionist.
Sorry.
On the union, he is.
Aye, but he's calmed it down. This is the same guy who told us that the R number in Scottish care homes was 10. And if it had been 10, every single person in a care home in Scotland would be dead by now.
Aye, I
So
remember that
funny,
one.
is it?
No,
Sorry.
well, it was let's say it was a mistake that was difficult to believe.
Aye.
He actually had it that I think it was like 1 million people in care homes. When you did the sums, it meant 1 million people in care homes were dead.
Aye. It was extraordinary, but it just proves the point that when he's dragged out, I mean, he's been retired for 17 years. Give the guy peace, for Christ's sake. Talk about filling your pension, Paul.
Well,
but his point of the day, the guy for the Telegraph tried to portray him as some kind of expert in border security, because he said that it would be impossible to police the border. Well, Mr. Pennington, I'm sorry, but when were you ever employed by Police Scotland? When have you ever known, like Stuart mentioned, the fines in Australia, the deterrent factor of those fines? That's what you do when you say you're going to shut the borders. When you've not got control to shut the borders, you say that we're going to fine you $2,000 if you come to Scotland. 90% of people won't travel for fear of that $2,000 fine.
I'm sure there is a wee group of nutter cybernats who have got every single road marked on a map, so when it comes to closing the borders, they can do it.
I know the back road in Kielder. I was thinking of going down there and blocking the road and making a protest. Not that there'd be a lot of tractors coming in and out, but
make it a dirty protest, mate. That's the way to shut the border. Just big, huge 6-foot pictures of that jobby emoji on every back road, because people will just shut themselves when they see it.
Oh yeah, all you would really have to do is stand at the services nearest to the border on the English side and cough. Hey, I'm for Scotland.
Come here, you're getting it.
There is one positive thing I'd like to mention that was almost lost in the fun and games of the First Minister's ability to really smother these idiots. Oh, God. I'm going to have to write a whole story about these journalists when this is all over. We discovered that in Scotland, they're doing so much work with their test and protect system and testing so many people in so many different ways, not just the standard, whatever the standard test is. And they're adding so much information into the system that for example, we gave an example, they're monitoring calls to NHS 24. So if there's a lot of people call in from a certain area with a cough, they can straight away isolate that, go and investigate that area as a possible hotspot. I mean, they're getting ahead of the game in Scotland.
Yeah, Stuart, that's a wonderful byproduct of actually setting up a test and protect system within the auspices of the NHS, where you're using staff that staff that notice things straight away, and we have 100% control of all the data. Deloitte are nowhere near it, so we can actually do stuff like that.
Not
Wonderful.
Not
It's the
strictly
one
true,
positive,
Jimmy.
like you say.
Deloitte
Hold
are still running our airport testing, aren't we? Our drive-throughs and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true, right enough, aye. But they're having to jump through our hoops instead of us jump through theirs, mate.
Oh, I hope so. Because I wouldn't like to find out that they'd forgotten about a couple of 100,000 tests or something like that.
They can't, mate. As I say, the Pillar 2 stuff we added, it's the Pillar 2 stuff they're having to deliver to us daily. As from June the 15th, they're doing stuff in Scotland that they don't have to do in England because the contract was written differently.
Why? Is that the simple difference that the Scottish government have insisted on the information and the British government haven't?
Aye.
I mean, is it as stupid as that?
Aye. The contract was written so that Deloitte didn't have the responsibilities in England and Wales, by the way, I believe, that they have in Scotland. They have to provide us with the Pillar 2 stuff because we insisted that we wanted to include it in our daily figures.
Well, there is I picked up, and I could be right, I could be wrong, but I picked up, of course, there are restrictions on the sharing of data.
That's their excuse.
Yeah, that's just
that's their excuse for the delay.
And what I heard today was why it was so slow in England was we were having to negotiate each individual authority that had to sign a deal before they were allowed to see the data for their.
That's just an excuse, mate. That's when these days in big public contracts, when you're failing to provide the data that you're contracted to provide, your absolute first line of defence is data protection.
Well, can I ask you two guys a question then? I know 15 people with ginger hair. Can you identify them on that information? There's 15 of them. So
I could probably identify about 4, Norrie, but then we are quite good pals.
Aye, well, that's the only way you would do it. How can you identify people from a number? How can Deloitte telling you that in this area you've got 62 positive cases? How can that be a data protection issue?
Exactly.
It becomes a data protection issue when Deloitte are asked to tell you who they are. So in other words, we need to trace and track these people. So we need a phone number, an address, whatever. Then it becomes a data issue, but actually publishing numbers.
But Deloitte are meant to do the trace and tracking as well. It's not even Public Health England just want the information of where the cases are. And if there are specific hotspots, they need to know where the hotspots are. The contract tracing's all done as part of Deloitte's contract as well, because they took on 25,000 gimbals on minimum wage to do that, instead of actually letting Public Health England, who are, you would hope, expert in doing contract tracing, because they've been doing it for decades for other diseases like we have up here.
Jimmy, that we are well aware of 10 years of austerity and cuts to the NHS, and this is apparently one of the areas that was most severely cut in England is Public Health England staff. They're very low in staff.
Why? I mean, to me, the simple solution is to change the law and basically say Public Health England should be entitled to any information. And then it becomes Public Health England's problem to protect the data.
That data. Aye.
I mean,
you're right, mate. But they could easily have done that under the emergency powers.
Well, yeah, they could do it in 5 minutes.
Aye, but there's no real benefit to a Conservative government in doing that. If they hand a few £100 million contract to Deloitte, there is a benefit to the Conservative Party anyway. Deloitte will chuck in a massive bloody donation to the Tory Party before the next election.
True. I think, was there anything else?
Brexit, you said.
Oh,
Brexit,
yeah, because nobody else is talking about it. I don't think I found a single front page headline pointing out that this is now the 1st of July. We no longer have the option to extend our negotiating period with the EU, so we're out. without a deal at the moment. They've got 6 months, although they don't. They've probably got about 4 months because any deal would have to be ratified by the European Parliament. So we are now non-Europeans without a deal.
Well, we kind of knew it was marching up the path. And after all, they did win their referendum, 52-48.
Yeah, and they won their election, and they've got 80+ majority. And apparently,
guys, it's not on any front pages.
Well, it wouldn't be on any
that.
front pages, mate. That Boris chucked in a huge deed cat yesterday about his Green New Deal and how wonderful he was. And
No. This is the single biggest. The hit on the economy from this will be bigger than coronavirus. And
but you're not allowed to say that.
One paper can run with it.
Upon coronavirus, it's nothing to do with us leaving the world's biggest and most successful single market. When our economy goes tits up, it's nothing to do with Brexit. It's all because we got the virus. Know what get with the programme, mate, because Boris
I fully understand what you're saying. I'm just stunned that I couldn't find a front page that went with it. Not even the National. Well, National had a much more important headline. Half of English Tories want to end the union.
Well, I was hoping we would end with that, finish with that.
They had that gimp feet wisher on the front page, I know.
It would appear that it took Yes Cymru, that's Yes Wales, to commission a poll to find out what the English really feel about themselves and the union. And I think it supports what Peter A. Bell's been saying for quite a while. We shouldn't be asking about independence. We should be saying, let's, end the union. It's not an attractive place for even English Tories, apparently.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's a Welsh poll, I didn't see why you would ever want to poll England about what they feel about the union. Sod all to do with them. This is our decision.
What I find most interesting about this is that the Tories really do believe the Scots are subsidy junkies. That expression that was thrown away in the Commons by a Tory MP, that's going to haunt the unionist community for generations. Well, because it's taken root and grown amongst the English.
And if you add it together with the whole attitude toward Brexit, and this, this is my argument. It's the unionists these days that are sowing division and separation. Who knew it would be them that would drive us for independence?
Well, I'm sorry. I've always thought it was the unionists that were at the root cause of this. The unionists have had numerous opportunities basically to treat the devolved administrations as separate countries who had an agreement with England, and they've never ever been able to grasp it. It's always been about domination of England.
They can't. It's not in their psyche, it's not in their thinking. They believe that we are dominions of England. We are possessions of the English throne, the English crown, and the English Parliament.
Well,
I mean, even in Parliament today, mate, Boris said there is no border between England and Scotland.
What?
And as Nicola pointed out, at the end of her presser, that is an absolutely absurd statement. To say there's no border, we all know there's a border because we've all bloody crossed it numerous times in our lifetime. Of course it exists. What she also pointed out is there's a geographical area where her powers are relevant and where her powers aren't. She can't go down to Newcastle or Berwick-upon-Tweed and insist that they follow the rules that the rest of Scotland, that we in Scotland are following because of the border. Apart from anything else. Interestingly, where does English law stop and Scottish law start if there's not a border?
At the French border, which probably doesn't exist either in Boris's head.
Aye, I mean, see that big island where your brother and Stuart's laddie are, in that big massive island. Do you think they've got a border between the water and the land?
Oh,
no exist.
Stuart, you were going to chip in there.
No, it's all right. You managed to sort of steal my thunder.
Oh,
Oops.
sorry.
I was going to be slightly facetious about the 50% of English Tories wanting to split up the union. However, I would recommend, I do have one thing to say. I think today, our friend Peter Ray Bell, he writes an awful lot. Not everything he writes is as worthy of rereading as this one, but today's piece I think is particularly good. I shared it with my English family, because there's nothing the least bit offensive about towards the English, far from it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give us the gist of it, a wee taster?
Well, basically it would be good for England. It's about ending the union, and just how people don't understand south of the border that during the 20th century, the Scottish attitude towards the English and the Scottish attitude to independence has changed to what they call civic nationalism. Generally speaking, we don't object to the English, we just object to being run by the English.
Aye. I thought it was a good piece as well, Stuart. And I don't know if, I think it was another piece that I read yesterday that had a similar sort of vein, but it was being particularly disparaging of these clowns who tell us that being Scottish nationalist and wanting independence is to be anti-English, which is just a nonsense. I mean, we all know that. But one of the points the guy threw in that I'd never actually thought of before, and it's quite a good one. In the last referendum, there's about 400,000 English people live in Scotland, and the majority of them voted no. Now, other than the extreme wacko moon howlers on the far, far reaches of nationalism, nobody's ever suggested that we shouldn't allow English people resident in Scotland to vote in the next referendum. It's not even a serious consideration. And if we were anti-English, then of course that would be a consideration.
There are blood and soil people around, especially in America, I think, and loads of Americans who think they've got Scottish heritage and they think they want a right to vote on Scotland's future.
And then the Ku Klux Klan, which was started by a Scotsman, never forget.
Yeah. And there's quite a lot of Scots in England who perhaps moved there in the last 50 years, or since Cornby, the days of
Aye. The Nottingham miners were almost exclusively Scots at one point, weren't they?
There was a time, quite a lot of Scots went down at certain periods for jobs. And there are some of them that during the period up to the 2014 referendum, they wanted a right to vote. But the principle has always been the people. It's the people that live here that have the right to choose how they're governed. Nothing to do with where you were born, nothing to do with the colour of your skin, nothing to do with your gender, anything. If you live here and you're old enough, you get to vote.
Exactly.
I'm on the fence about this.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
That's the simple, elegant solution. But I'm not entirely sure that I wouldn't like my son in London to have a vote. I wouldn't take votes from English people who lived here. If you live here, you get a vote. But I do think if I'm not sure about it. It's the simplest, most elegant. I'm not sure it's the fairest, though.
It hands out. If you let people from out with Scotland cast a vote in the Scottish election, it's undemocratic, mate, and it hands our opponents a big stick to beat us with.
Well, it would be hugely complicated. I mean, would it only apply to people who were born in Scotland, people who were born of Scottish parents? You know, it's hugely complicated. I accept that.
Look at how they decide which country you can play for, football, rugby, all sorts of sports. That's complicated enough.
It is, but I can see it. I mean, it does work in other countries. I know a couple of my friends who are Polish who have just voted in their recent presidential election, and they've intention really of going back to Poland. They made a life here, and they're probably going to stay here. But they thought it was that important that they vote this time to try and get rid of the extreme right.
It was possible during the EU elections that if you were British and you lived in France, you could have voted. Or was it the other way around?
Well, the French get to vote in French elections. if they're living in Britain. I mean, I also know people who voluntarily didn't vote because they didn't think it was their argument. You know, people from the EU and a couple of English people who said they weren't going to vote in the referendum because it was a decision, as far as they were concerned, for Scots.
The whole question of English people being here in Scotland, unlike where in Wales in our lifetime, certainly not in mine, there was a kind of nationalism in Wales where they were burning second homes, English-owned second homes in Wales. Now, that never happened in Scotland. There was a very short period where they talked about white settlers in the Highlands. But to be honest, when you look back on it historically, it was as much people moving up from Edinburgh and Glasgow into the Highlands as it was people coming up from England.
Plus, at that time, we were probably being run by a Scotsman. The country.
One other thing I've always noticed in Leith, over the years, having 30 years of living here, generally speaking, you really don't notice people's accent or where they came from until you went off the pub to watch a football match, so in Millwall or somewhere, and then you realise, oh yeah, I'd forgotten he was English.
Well, I have a guy I bump into whenever I go out to watch the England-Scotland rugby game. Big English boy, always wears a really prominent St. George's Cross T-shirt, you know, and you know it's fine, it's great, it's sport, and the guy's been here for years and voted yes, but England's his team, so he supports England, and that's fine. And he understands why Scots will never support England against anybody else.
Did he understand how quite so many of us were dancing about in poly bags for Iceland the day that Iceland pumped England at the football?
Yes, he did. He's one of the few Englishmen that doesn't look very confused when England plays Germany and the whole Scottish-filled pub supports Germany. He gets it. He gets it, I have to say. He's a nice guy. He's a good guy. And he's huge, so I'm not going to argue with him about anything. Anything to finish with, boys?
Wish rain would stop.
We've been down discussing the weather. Can you tell me if that rain crossed the border or not?
I think I had to stop and get tested.
I can see the castle, but I can't see the Pentlands. So
all right. So it's quite heavy, but not very heavy.
No raining at the moment.
Jimmy, you were going to say?
No, nothing exciting, mate. I was probably just burbling pish as usual.
Okay. We'll call it a day at that then, folks. Thanks, Stuart Lockhead. Thank you, Jimmy Hutton. I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow, which is Thursday. One day short of Hat Friday. And I hope all our listeners are wearing hats on a Friday as well.
Cheers.
Cheers for now, guys.